It's our turn, episode number 76, Exploring the Self by Designing Games. In this episode, I welcome game designers Kathleen Mercury and Emelie van Rodin to the show, and we talk about game design.
This is the Dice Tower Network, adding games to your wish list since 2005.
Hosting for this episode is generously provided by our fantastic supporters on Patreon.com. If you'd like to help us out by pledging $1 per month or more, please visit patreon.com/OurTurnPodcast. Every dollar helps us to keep this show going strong. Hi, and welcome back to Our Turn. I'm Cathy Ford, and today I am joined by two very special guests. I am happy to welcome Kathleen Mercury back to the show. She was on as an interview guest in an earlier episode, and now she's here as a guest host. Kathleen, welcome back.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm so thrilled to be a part of this.
Oh, I'm thrilled to have you. And I'm also happy to welcome Emelie van Rodin to the show. And Emelie is joining us from Sweden. Emelie, welcome to Our Turn.
Hey, thank you. And I'm really thrilled to be here. I can't explain how much I've been jumping in my chair all day. But it's going to be amazing.
Oh, I think so too. I asked Kathleen and Emelie to join me for our hot topic today, and it just kind of evolved into, let's just do the whole show together. So I'm very excited. Kathleen, can you go ahead and reintroduce yourself to the audience a little bit? Tell them about who you are, what you do, that kind of thing.
Sure. My name is Kathleen Mercury, and for my day job, I'm a teacher. I teach middle school gifted kids, so high IQ, kids who range in age from about 12 to 14, and I do all kinds of geeky stuff with them. Primarily, I teach game design, and if you're interested in teaching game design, I've put all my resources for teaching game design on my website at kathleenmercury.com. And so I teach everything from, board game design. We've been dabbling into RPG design. I do a cosplay unit, filmmaking, whatever sounds fun and cool. That's what I get to do all day long. And then I also design games as well. And so I've got a couple projects that have been signed, and one of them I'm having to rework right now, but that's a game with Colossal that's been announced called Dirty Dragons that I'm super excited about.
Nice. Mm-hmm. And Emelie, can you give us a little bit of an introduction about who you are?
Yeah, I am a full-time indie developer working on my first commercially viable project called State of Wonder. It is currently on Kickstarter.
Future Cathy here. Sadly, we had some technical difficulties getting this recording done in time for Emelie's Kickstarter, so that campaign is done. However, I am happy to say that it fully funded, and if you're interested in pre-ordering Emelie's game, we have a link to that in the show notes. Okay, now back to Emelie.
And outside of that, I work a lot more with design, and I've been traveling around Sweden and doing some small talks together with some other developers and on how it is to be an international developer as a first-time developer at the same time. It's been quite some fun, actually. And yeah, I don't really know what more to say. I love building games. My entire life is built around building games as much as possible.
Mm-hmm.
That's exciting. All right. So we usually start the show off by talking about what we have been playing lately. So Kathleen, why don't you start us off? What have you been playing lately?
Well, I got the chance to play Downforce that Restoration Games has put out, which is a redo of Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix and I think one other game. Maybe it was called Downforce. I'm not sure. But it's a game that I was able to see play tested quite a bit last summer at different cons, and I finally got a chance to play it, and I really loved it. I have Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix. I have the Mayfair version. I don't know if it has other editions, and it's a racing game where you play cards, but the cards that you play they have different cars on them and different speeds. So you have to, play the cards that best optimize the race for your card while hopefully, getting everybody stuck in big, massive clumps and all that other stuff. And so what I really like about Downforce is, especially for my students with Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix, you can't really learn it and play it in 45 minutes because it's meant to be played in multiple races. But the nice thing with Downforce is it absolutely can be played in that 45 minutes. It's only one race, but what they've done is they've incorporated different periods that not just you're trying to race and win your own car, but you also can bet on which cars you think are going to do well. So there's this like secondary way for you to score points. And the nice thing with that too is I think it really helps keep you engaged, especially even if your car is not losing, you have the opportunity to score some points based on other cars are doing as well. So I have 2 copies of Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix in my classroom, but I'm going to get Downforce and those will be replaced. Detroit Cleveland Grand Prix is a great game, but I love what Downforce has added to that. So I'm really excited, and I had a lot of fun playing that one recently.
Nice. Restoration Games is kind of an exciting company right now.
Oh, I love what they're doing. Yeah, absolutely.
They're taking old games and revamping them, modernizing them, streamlining them. I know that Tom Vassell of the Dice Tower is very excited because they're in the process of redoing Fireball Island, which I had never heard of, but apparently it was a big game in the 80s.
Used copies of that have been quite expensive for people looking for copies of it. And actually, there's a guy local in town, Noah Edelman. He owns a company, Game Trays, and I think he's the one been working with them on creating the molds to actually make the 3-dimensional structure. So I've got to see some of his prototypes too. And it's really a cool process.
Nice.
Yeah.
I've heard that people are really excited about that. And I've heard good things about Downforce as well. Well, one game that I have been excited about, I had an exciting week last week. I had 2 Kickstarters show up in the mail. I was able to try them both out. The first one is Long Live the Queen. This game it's funny because the designer isn't credited on BGG, and I haven't been able to find it on the box either. But apparently this was a game that came out in 2014, but they recently did a Kickstarter for it. Beginning of last year, I believe. Apparently it was a game in Japan, and I think maybe this is the English translation of it. And the theme of it is that the queen has died unexpectedly and left 2 daughters, and they are both vying for the throne. And they each have their own court that's made up of different people who have different asymmetrical powers. And the courts are lined up along a number line, and the princesses are in the middle. You roll dice to determine which of the courtiers get activated. And when they're activated, they get turned over, they get turned face up. And then the next time they're activated, their power kicks in. And there are different powers. Like there's an assassin who will take out the person on the opposite number as them. So, for example, if you're on 2, then you would take out number 9, for example. There's the princesses are on the timeline. And you lose the game if either your princess is turned upside down. The other win condition is if a player gains 3 prestige tokens of each color, and there are 3 colors. So you gain these prestige tokens as your courtiers are activated. But the thing is if you get too many prestige tokens of one color, then your machinations are obvious, and so then you lose all those prestige tokens and they go back into the pool. But there are ways to steal prestige tokens from your opponent. There are ways to turn their courtiers face down. Each courtier is on a tile. So it is a tile-laying game, and the other mechanism is dice rolling. I was only able to get in one play of this game. I was talking to my friend Richard, who played it with me. Hi, Richard. And he realized after we were done that we had missed a step consistently, that we just forgot about one step in the game where you can move your tiles around. You can swap tiles. So that allows your courtiers to move around and get into different positions and things like that. I think that would have made a big difference in how we played and different things that we did. So I'm looking to get this to the table again so I can try to play it correctly. Still, I think it's a good, solid game. It's a nice little filler game. You can play it in about 20 to 30 minutes. And I would give it a 4 on our OTP rating scale, which is 4 out of 5.
I'm looking at the art, and it looks really cool.
Yeah, it's kind of an anime art style. So that is Long Live the Queen, and that's from Ludi Creations. Mm-hmm. Emelie, what have you been playing lately?
So I was out at a convention, and I was able to grab a random game. And we were playing a game called Maximum Apocalypse. And it's a cooperative, like, survive the apocalypse game where you're supposed to fulfill objectives in small missions. Mm-hmm. And you're working together to do this. I really love that kind of themes. Like Fireteam Zero is one of my favorite games of all times. And it's a mix of post-apocalyptic horror and World War II. So it's like, it's like the old Mutant Chronicles game thematic. And I really love that kind of theme. So I was really hyped about this game. When they started showing off all the cards and how it worked, I was really like, oh, this is going to be fantastic. I love the artwork. And then we started playing, and I was really disappointed by how it worked. And I was so like, after the entire hype with how everything looked, I got into this, oh, this didn't really work out. It's like you build your own world with tiles that you have to explore. And the goal is often to find resources on these tiles. So you need to explore them. But as soon as you find the correct tiles, you can just stand there and scavenge forever to find all the things you need. If you're playing like 3 players, the game is super easy, and it's described and pitched as a really hard game for cooperative players who like really hard cooperative games. When I looked at it and tried to find information about it later, and I was really surprised because it was really easy to find the best strategies, which was to stay in one place, scavenge for as long as you can. And it took away the entire theme of running around in a post-apocalyptic wasteland and trying to survive and finding all the things you need to find. So it was like being super hyped about something, and then you actually get to sit down and play it. And it's pretty much oh, this wasn't very good. And I really like hard games. Like cooperative games you should lose them most % of the time when I play games. So I might not be the core cooperative player demographic in that way. One of the things was pacing. Like the game never really felt threatening because you could just sit there and do your thing, and you had the statistics on your side all the time. So the only way to do badly or bad stuff happening to your character was by doing stupid things. It also led to the problem of if you're doing the best things you can do, you're most likely doing nothing or giving someone else your turn. It had a lot of design problems that I think could have been found out earlier. And if they could have just went back and make 10 more blind tests or 5 more blind tests, they would most likely have found these and been able to make a better experience, in my opinion. And according to the Our Turn podcast, I would have to give this game a 2. It has fantastic art and I love the theme, but like the gameplay just didn't measure up. I was actually really, really sad about that.
Oh, that's too bad. You know, there's another game that I really like to play called Firefly. It has different scenarios. That's what keeps the gameplay different, is you're trying to achieve different things. But there's this one scenario where you just basically get to mine a planet until it's like depleted of any of its resources. And we played that once and I didn't like it. I didn't like that mechanism. A friend of mine played it with me. And now every time we play the game together, he will sit on one planet and mine it until he gets a whole bunch of resources. It kind of slows the game way down. Mm-hmm. Makes it less fun than if you're forced to go out looking for things.
Yeah, and here it was like the best and fastest strategy to do this. And it just felt really weird to do that, because if you moved around, you just lost entire parts of your turn because you were moving around. So if you found a good place to scavenge, you were just sitting there scavenging. And then when you had all the things you needed, you headed back to the objective. We were close to dying early. Like, we were not close to dying. We had like 10 out of 30 hit points left. But at that point, that when we were damaged, we just completely stopped taking risks. Everyone in the group just stopped doing anything that was dangerous. Mm-hmm. We just focused on clearing the objectives as fast as possible. And that was when I noticed these problems. Like, we had been playing the wrong way from the start, with exploring and finding all the cool things on the map. And that's when I felt like the game really lost its flavor. Like, it's just a find the right tile, sit there, and then go to the objective tile. Mm-hmm. It felt weird to play it because that's not what I want out of my post-apocalyptic experience. And many people don't like that in a roguelike as well. They want you to be able to go out, and everywhere is dangerous, so you have to move because this place will become dangerous. But that just didn't happen.
Mm-hmm. There was one game that I played at BGG a couple years ago with the publishers, and they had mentioned something about it going up on Kickstarter, so something about Kickstarter. And so we're playing the game. And, I was pointing out some things because, like, how I was supposed to play the game and what actually made sense to do were two different things. Like, oh, you're not playing it right. I'm like, no, if this is what the goal is, this is a fine way to go about it, and we were talking about it, and it's like what you're wanting people to do, it doesn't make sense to do that, And so then one point, when the guy said, well, where were you in playtesting? And then I was like, well, how many times did you playtest this, And then I said, well, you've got time to work on this before the Kickstarter. They're like, no, it's already been Kickstarted. Like, oh, I was like, oh, okay. So they were just basically like just demoing it to get people interested into it. And the game had, some pretty fatal flaws, I think, that, and I think that's one thing. It's just, there's such a rush sometimes to get stuff out, especially if there's, a designer of note on it or something like, oh, it's his game, it's going to be good. Her game, it's going to be good, obviously. But this was just one where it was just disappointing because it had so much potential to be a really fun game, but just the actual way to win wasn't that fun.
There should always be more than one way to play a game and achieve the goals. I don't think people like being railroaded into playing a game one specific way.
But one of the things that is important is that all the ways to victory, or the main way to victory, is fun to do. And that was one thing that there are so many games that they have all of these cool things. And I was actually, when I was playtesting in its early State of Wonder, this was one of the problems. One of the best way to win was not fun at all. So we had to design all of that away and work with, like, how do we make the best way to win also fun to play, so people will want to play it like that. Like you said earlier, Kathleen, with the playtesting, you just needed more playtesting with this. And I can see so many games that I have played that are from smaller publishers on Kickstarter often come to that problem. Like, I think before I was ever ready to take State of Wonder to Kickstarter, I have over 1,000 hours of lone playtesting with myself or with like one or two friends. You can become blind from it as well, but yeah.
It's hard. And I think we'll get more into this when we start talking more about designing games too, because there's what you want and does it actually do that? And do you have the ability to really see that when you're in the moment, when you're emotionally and intellectually invested in something being a certain way?
Yep. All right. So that game was called what, Emelie?
Maximum Apocalypse from Rock Manor Games.
Okay. Kathleen, what else have you been playing?
Well, I got the chance to play Palace of Mad King Ludwig. I've always enjoyed playing the Castles of Mad King Ludwig. The scoring is a little wonky, I think, especially when you're just learning it. And I'm not one much for, like, point salad kind of game. So in general, but I always enjoyed playing Mad King Ludwig because I just always enjoyed building a castle. So in some ways, I just had, fun mucking around and seeing what was what. And then as I understood the game better, then obviously trying to play a little bit more skillfully and usually doing better. And so I was interested to see how the Palace of Mad King Ludwig was going to impact the game. Both games have a learning curve that's pretty steep, especially as far as just understanding the points of when you need to score things, where you score things now or score things at the end, and keeping track of everything. Because, that's one thing is there's a fair amount of symbols, a fair amount of, in-game effects, end-game effects. So I was excited to see the Palace. And so basically, instead of Mad King Ludwig, where all the rooms are different shaped, here these are all squares. So everything fits together, and there's different doorways, and they have swans on them. And so if you match colors of swans, and you can collect swan tokens, and, different sets of those swans can give you points. Plus, you have the ability to pick up different, individual scoring bonuses. You can unlock certain powers along the way. And so it's definitely not a co-op game, but there's definitely something to be said about where you're building, because you're all building the same castle. And so if you build really quickly and kind of close yourself off, then the game's going to end pretty fast. But you also can kind of build out and spread out, because as the game goes on, you start adding moat tiles. You add water all around the periphery, and when the whole castle is surrounded by water, that's the end of the game. It was like an interesting interpretation. I would want to play it again to decide which one I would want to play more. I mean, I like on one hand building my own, crazy castle with, no bedrooms and 15 utility rooms. But then there's also something they said we were actually building something, but kind of looks like a castle, but even then it doesn't really, because it's all just kind of weird shapes and stuff like that. I mean, I never liked Suburbia, which was one of the precursor games, because to me the theme is just so dry. And I'm a mechanic. I mean, I'm a thematic kind of person. I love really great immersive themes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah, willing to overlook, some things mechanically, maybe if it's just, kind of a cool, fun experience to have at the table. So yeah, I think before I buy it, I would say that I definitely want to play it again. I do like that everyone is working sort of together on building the same one, but you have ways to, maximize your own. I think it's a lot easier in some ways to play this one, because you definitely can see better, I think, how other people are doing, as opposed to where people have their one individual castle. So I think especially if you don't like that aspect of Castles of Mad King Ludwig, having everything in one sort of shared space is really good. Other than people's individual boards, and they'll have some secret scoring things, but otherwise, yeah, I think I would want to play that one before I played the Castles of Mad King Ludwig again, just to see. But I also think it's a lot faster in terms of setup and game flow. It plays a little bit faster and a little bit better than Castles does as well. So that one I need to play that one again before I could really recommend it. But, I liked it.
Yeah. What kind of a rating would you give it?
I would definitely say probably, I think based on preference, but I would say somewhere between a 3 and a 4,
okay.
As far as the game goes. I mean, I think it's pretty specific, and so if people don't enjoy that as a gaming experience, they won't enjoy it, but I want to play it again. I don't know that I would buy it, but I'd be probably happy to play it if a friend had it.
Okay.
Well, and actually my boyfriend bought it, so it's actually kind of a moot point, really. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, I have played Castles of Mad King Ludwig a couple of times.
Mm-hmm.
I personally wasn't real impressed with it, but I think it's probably because I've only played it a couple of times. Mm-hmm. And like you said, it's one of those games that you need to play a few times to kind of explore how to develop a strategy to win the game. I think I just haven't had that opportunity because I don't own the game and none of my close friends own the game. So
yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, but I like the building part. I like actually like making a little castle kind of come to life and getting everything to fit together, so that sort of like Lego aspect of working with all these different pieces was always, probably my favorite part of it. This one I think helps to balance out like the wonkiness of the scoring and in terms of like being able to see what other people are doing, because there's the one shared gaming space. So you can get a better sense of how other people are doing. You can track better what other people are doing. So if you didn't like that aspect of Castles of Mad King Ludwig, the Palace of Mad King Ludwig, I think can offer that for you. And the funny thing too is, I live in St. Louis, where Jamie Stegmeyer lives. He's with Stonemaier Games, and so I've gone to his game design day, and they were play testing a game they're working on. It was basically a combination of Between Two Cities and Castle of Mad King Ludwig, and so it's a really interesting one. And as far as because this is again working with square tiles as well, but then you're still working on individual castles. So it'll be fun to see once you've got like these 3 sorts of interpretations out there in terms of seeing what people like best.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right.
There's nowhere near enough castles for us, I guess. Yeah. There must be more.
Building games are always fun. Mm-hmm. They're always fun. The next game I want to talk about is another Kickstarter that I received recently called The Lady and the Tiger. Mm-hmm. Have either of you been following this one at all?
Well, I'm good friends with Peter. He was working here in St. Louis for a good long while. When he was working with Greater Than Games, he was here in town for a good while. And so I actually got my copy of Lady and the Tiger, but I haven't yet gotten a chance to play it. So I'm interested to hear what your thoughts are. This
is very unique because it's a small deck of cards, but it's actually 5 separate games that you can play with one deck of cards.
Yeah, I'm sorry I'm jumping in one more time. But Peter, when he was looking for people to publish games, I actually had students, just as individual projects, I had a few students work on developing games for it when he put out the call that he was looking. I had kids a couple different groups of kids work on prototypes for the Lady and the Tiger with just those materials, and none of them could kind of get what they wanted to work as well as they did, so no one submitted them. But yeah, I actually had kids working on that as a project.
Nice. So first off, I want to say that the artwork is amazing.
Mm-hmm.
These are tarot-sized cards. Most of the cards are either a red hue or a blue hue. They, like the name says, they have ladies and tigers on them individually. And I love the way that the ladies are all different ethnicities.
Mm-hmm.
And they have, Europeans. They have one gal that looks like she could be Polynesian.
Mm-hmm.
Another gal looks African. Another one looks Arabic. She's even got a hijab on. Another one is Asian. And there's also a variety of facial expressions. They're not all happy-looking individuals. Some of them look angry. Some of them look determined. Some of them look happy.
Mm-hmm.
So I love this. And then the tigers are all different too. Some of the tigers look happy. Some of the tigers look angry. One of them looks almost like a house cat, just kind of soft and fluffy kind of look. So the art on these is amazing. When I was looking at the Kickstarter, the artist Tanya Walker was apparently inspired by MC Escher, who's one of my favorite artists. MC Escher does all the art where the staircases are going in different directions and things are kind of look upside down or inside out. When you look at his art, you really get drawn in and it makes you want to stand there and explore what he's drawn. Her art isn't as odd as MC Escher's is.
Mm-hmm.
Her art is very beautiful, but I can see the influence.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, but we were able to play 2 of the 5 games, and they are neat little filler games. They take anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes to play. They're easy and quick to learn. My husband happened to be in the hospital last week. He's fine now and is home and feeling better. But when you're in the hospital, you're trying to kill time. And I happened to have this game in my purse, so I pulled it out and we were able to play it on his hospital bed table. The first one that we played was called Doors, and that is a social deduction game. The other thing I like about the setup is that each of the games that are included, they've included player aid cards as well. So in Doors, you're playing either the collector or the guesser. And you're each dealt an identity. So there are identity cards. They have gold banding around them, so they stand out from the other cards. And they also have doors on the back of them. And you can either be the red tiger, the red lady, the blue tiger, or the blue lady. But then you want to collect cards that go with your identity, but maybe trip up the person who's trying to guess what your identity is. The collector each turn collects a card, and it does not have to match your identity. And then you can score a set that matches one trait of your identity. Sets are made of 4 cards, which all match one of your identity's traits. So you could be the red lady, but you could be collecting blue lady cards because it matches the fact that you're a lady.
Mm-hmm.
You could also be collecting red tigers because you're the red lady. So once you have 4 cards that all match one trait of your identity, then that scores you 6 points. End game is the first person to get to 10 points. Then the guesser, on their turn, they get to discard a card from the display, the cards in the middle of the table. And then they have the option of guessing all or part of the collector's identity. So you can say, "You're a lady," or you can say, "You're a tiger." But if you decide to guess and try and get the whole identity, that will score you 5 points. So you could say, "You're the red lady." Well, if you don't get it all right, yes, the collector is the blue lady. You got the lady part right, but you didn't get the color part right, then you're wrong. And the collector gets points for you being wrong. So that was a fun game, and it's a quick little social deduction game. And then the other one is an auction game called Favor. You are again dealt identities, and you're trying to collect cards that match your identity, but you have to bid on them. One thing that was included in the deck of cards were 2 wild cards. One of the wild cards is a tree that is half blue and half red. And the other wild card is a black and white card that has both a lady and a tiger on it. If you're able to get both of these cards, in an auction, then you score extra points because they can be used to mitigate some things. If you're the red lady and you collect a blue lady in an auction, you can use the color card to change her color to red, and that will get you more points. Again, fun little game. It took about 20 minutes to play it. It's played over 3 auctions. We had a lot of fun. It was quick and easy for me to teach. Like I said, my husband was in a hospital bed, so his mind wasn't totally on the game, but it was a nice little diversion in those circumstances. And we're looking forward to exploring the other games. There's a solo game, and then there's 2 other games. There's a solo game called Horde, and it's a puzzle game. There's Labyrinth, which is a maze game, and that plays 2 players. And then there's one called Traps, and it's a bluffing game, and it's for 2 to 6 players. These games all play well for 2 players, except Horde, which is a solo game. They can go higher than that. The games are all very different from one another, but they all use the same deck of cards. And I'm surprised more game designers don't use, this idea of, we have an existing deck of cards. How many games can we make for this? With the standard deck of cards, that's been around for a long, long time. So I'm just surprised more people don't do it. That is The Lady and the Tiger. The games I've played so far, I give it a good solid 4. To be honest, I am torn between playing the games and taking the whole deck into a framing store and getting it framed to put on my wall.
That's cool.
So
yeah.
That's when you know the art is really great.
I'm sure Peter would be more than happy to sell you another.
That's when you know the art is really great, when you just want to take it up and frame it on your wall.
Yeah, I was looking into getting some tarot-size card sleeves for these because I don't want them to get damaged. Emelie, what's your next game?
It's a game that is still in development, but is going to Kickstarter next month, and it's called Highways and Byways.
I've been hearing about this on Twitter.
Yeah, it's a racing game, and I've never played a racing game that I really enjoyed, but this was the first one that blew me away. I think I've played it 7 times on Tabletop Simulator with the creator Brandon. And every time we've been playing in the middle of the night because Sweden, and he's from somewhere in the United States. I have no idea where. Every time I play it, I've been falling in love more and more with it because it doesn't do traditional racing in the sense of traditional racing. You're still trying to race, but it's doing so many other things. Everyone is trying to do their own path. You don't have a set course that everyone runs through, but everyone builds their own course in the start of the game. And they do this by drafting cards. And I'm a huge card game geek, so drafting cards is something I love to do. And I love the drafting in Highways because it's very different from other drafts. Because you only have 2 cards, and you pick one of them. And then the other player flips up a new card and picks one of those. And then those cards go out on the table. And the idea is to build the best racing path you can. And after you've done this and you found all your roads and all the paths you need to do, because you have to travel across a certain set of roads, then you go into this the racing part of the game is just, you can move 6 squares every turn, but events will happen that will either slow you down or fasten you up. So it's about getting the best path possible and then mitigating the events that can happen to you. And this is in a hand management thing. You have a hand of events, so you don't want any bad events in your hand while you're playing. So you have to discard cards, and you have to find new cards and draw new cards. And then all of a sudden you have to trade your hand with another player. And then you don't want your good cards. You want to just throw away all your good cards and find bad cards, so you can give them to the other player. And this aspect of how it works with the hand management it's one of the most brilliant way I've seen hand management be really fun. And it's in a game type I've never, I generally play very, very heavy games. Highways and Byways is not a very heavy game. You can sit down with your family and play it in it takes some time to play. It takes 45 minutes, but you can sit down and you don't really have to do all the hand management things. But if you're a player who loves to do statistics in your head and count chances and do all of these things, the game still caters to that play style, and it's amazing. And then you can race. The racing part of the game is actually, in my opinion, a quote unquote worst part of the game, because you can just calculate the exact best path and then just execute that at the start of the game. But like, I think that he's been trying to sort that out in the last couple of weeks since we've been playing. So yeah, the Highways and Byways has been one of the highlights for me, and this is one of the few games that I've actually been I've been setting aside a budget to do a day one fund of it, or a day one pledge, because generally I'm very on the fence about Kickstarters myself, and that's really weird because I'm doing a Kickstarter, but I generally like to sit around and wait and see what is happening here and what are they doing here, and ask myself if I want to wait for retail and be very cautious about it. But here I don't know if I'm going to do a big premium pledge, but I'm definitely getting this game because I can play it with my girlfriend, or I can play it with my not really hardcore gaming friends and still get a game that I can play at a level where I really love the game. And they can play it more casually without doing all the maths and without doing all the statistics and counting that they don't like to do. And that's fantastic. I've not seen it blend that well. And I'm giving this a game a 4.5 out of 5. It's not really at a 5 level, but it's somewhere between those two. I was really hesitant to test this when he was testing it in Tabletop Simulator, and it was I'm really glad I took the decision to test it out. And I think if you like Ticket to Ride, or if you like any kind of racing games, or if you like Seven Wonders and drafting games and hand management games, if you like any of those games, this is a game that will really work for you.
Future Cathy here again. Sadly, the Highways and Byways Kickstarter campaign was canceled by the designer, Brandon Rollins, and he's moved on to another project. If this game hits Kickstarter again, I'll try to get Brandon on the show because this sounds like a lot of fun to me. Now, back to Emelie's review of it.
Well, I like what Brandon's been doing as far as, getting with this game, because he has a Discord channel for game design that he's active with. He's got a newsletter where he emails out weekly or so, just different, thoughts and articles about game design. He's been really active about putting the game on tabletop. I haven't gotten a chance to try it, and I definitely, based on what you're saying, I want to now. But I like what he's doing in terms of trying to, get established within the gaming industry and make connections and communicate and, promote his game, because I think that's really smart, especially for Kickstarters. So I'm glad to hear that the game is good too, in addition to all those other efforts.
Yeah, I don't understand how he can have a full-time work and do all the other things he does at the same time. I'm on the Pangea Discord server, and that was how I got into the Tabletop Simulator testing. It's what he's doing, many of the things he's doing, I am taking as small tidbits of pieces and trying to put into practice myself, because many of the marketing things is just brilliant, and many of his tips are life-saving. So it's
definitely,
that's really one of the things I would look out for, Highways and Byways.
Okay, great. And that's what we've been playing.
We have set up and been referring to and rating games by our own rating scale. Here's how we are using this scale. 5. Buy this now. 4. A good solid game. 3. Decent with some bugs. 2. Has great potential as kindling. And 1. Give me back the time I spent playing it.
Now we're getting into our hot topic, and the topic for today was decided on by our Patreon supporters, and it is exploring the self by designing games. And to discuss this, I am joined again by Kathleen Mercury and Emelie Van Rodin. I am so glad you two are here to talk with me about this, because I am not a game designer. I've said this before on the show. I've heard people say that, every gamer wants to be a game designer, and I'm here to tell you that's not entirely true. I really don't have any interest in designing my own game. I am not a puzzle person, and I know from watching my friends design games that it's a puzzle process. You have to figure out what works, what doesn't work, what needs to go, what needs to come in, things like that. And that is just an activity that does not sing to me. But I am so glad there are people like you that it does sing to. So
gluttons for punishment.
We all have our talents and skills and abilities and our various interests, and that's what makes life so interesting. Kathleen, let's start with you. What got you interested in designing board games?
Well, I started having students play games where, I learned about this whole world of board games and the types of games that I should have in my classroom. And that was about, 10, 11, 12 years ago. And so I've been playing some games that were on like the simpler side. And I know how deceptive that seems from a game design standpoint, but I just was thinking like my students could do this. I teach high IQ students. I teach our gifted program and middle school kids. And I thought they absolutely can come up with something like this, similar to this. And so I've been doing that for about 10 years, having kids design games. Well, I feel like I hate the expression, those who can't do teach. I hate that. That's not true. But especially since I have my students design games, I felt like I should be doing this too, obviously. Plus, I thought it was fun. That's why we did it in the first place.
Right.
And so, I've designed a lot of things that have stalled out or haven't really gone anywhere or anything. But I've gotten lucky the last couple years to have a couple projects that have had some legs and a couple publishers have been interested in. And so that's where I'm at now. It's something I think about constantly. It's something I need to be doing more, not just thinking about, but it's something that's just always, always, always running in the back of my mind about, problems or new ideas, or it's just that kind of, can I set a problem for myself and can I design the solution that's fun out of this problem? And to me, that's just so endlessly entertaining.
Okay. And Emelie, how about you? What got you interested in doing game design?
I can't really say that there is one specific event that got me super interested, but I started modding games when I was really young. I started playing StarCraft and Warcraft 2 when I was 4 years old. And the first things I was doing was actually building custom-made maps with specific rules, and my cousin and my mother actually learned me to script. So that got me into all that world of game design. And when I was 12, 13, I started making tabletop role-playing games because I was I can't afford to buy the books for old Pathfinder, old Dungeons and Dragons and stuff like that. And I didn't even know where to find the books. Because I was so young and we didn't have a game store where I lived back then. So we built our own role-playing games for 2 years. And then I started up a youth company that built games when I was 15.
Wow.
And we attended 2 conferences with 2 of our games. One was really terrible. The other was less terrible than we did. Our programmer was 13-year-old and he built his own coding engine. And I was the designer behind both games. They were both still terrible, but they weren't super bad. And we had some great artists, and it was more like a I don't know what's it called in English, where youth hang out in their free time. But we built games and we went around to conferences and showed it off, and we had a really, really great time doing it. There was basically no money involved, but at this point I knew where I was going with my life. I loved building systems, I loved building games, but mostly I loved building systems. So I kept doing that. So I abandoned my music school that I went to music college or music high school. I don't know the conversion to English. But so I went straight into game design university and took a bachelor's in game design. And from there on out, I had some savings and I started up a small company, and now I'm here.
Wow.
That's so cool.
That is. How does game design allow you to express yourself, Kathleen?
Well, I think this is really interesting because, You learn so much about yourself when you're working through a game design process. And of the two games that I have under contract, one was a game that started out as my boyfriend. My boyfriend, Mark Selmeyer, he's a game designer. He Rio Grande published his game Spin Monkeys 5-6 years ago. He's always working on games, coming up with new scenarios or published games to run at cons. Like he's always designing games. And he had this one game that I just hated. It was so boring and I'd fuss about it. I'm like, it's not fun. It's not fun. Well, finally we were talking about this game on the way out to his parents' house. And I said, what if it was this? And it's just one of those moments where all of a sudden, like his pen is flying across his sketchbook and we're just, talking this all out, and it's just like, the idea is there and it's building and stuff. And, to where he's like, why are we going out to my parents' house? We could be home designing games, And so because of like my involvement, then I became co-designer on that game and we worked together on that one. And it was kind of funny because we're very different as far as game designers. I'm much more about player experience. He's much more about mechanics. And so I think we drive each other crazy, but I think it's a good pairing for that because we just have such different experiences, perspectives on what we want to see on the table. But the thing with that one was it was really easy for me to just, like scratch out, like, this doesn't work. This doesn't make sense, that sort of thing. But things like that he had really worked on and wanted to keep. So I was talking about just like killing it. Like, it was no problem for me to kill his sacred cows. So this does not make sense. This doesn't make the game fun. This is what the game should be. If this is what the game should be, then we need to go in this direction, that sort of thing. And so then that was fine and great. And we signed it and we're waiting to find out when that's going to go in the production schedule. And so we wait. But then for my other game, I designed a game more or less. It was the first one that I did like all the way through to where I was showing it at conventions, but it's really expensive because it's 3-dimensional and all the component cost is nutsy and all kinds of things. And so we were, I'd shown this around a lot and no one, like, it was basically people thought it was hilarious and people actually know me and recognize me because of that game because they even heard about it. But it was just something that from a, publisher standpoint was too expensive. But then when Travis Chance, who I've known for years, who when he left Indie Boards and Cards and started up Colossal, he put out a call for, big, splashy, Kickstarter friendly games. I'm like, well, it's definitely big and splashy, like, if I got a game for you. And so I took it to Dice Tower Con last summer and we were play testing it and we're just having fun with it. And he looked at me at one point, and I love this story and I've told this so many times because it makes me laugh. He's probably tired of it, but he just looked at me, he's like, God damn it, Kathleen. And I'm like, because it's good, right? This whole big crazy mess. So the thing was it was themed as pigeons, and you were pigeons, every player had a flock of pigeons flying from rooftop to rooftop. That's the 3-dimensional part. And you're dropping poop cubes onto tiles and have people and cars. Yeah. Yeah. So it was funny. And then there's a falcon that would come out, and I had an old antenna from a TV or something that I would slide down on a ring. It was a falcon, actually a pendant, but a falcon, and you'd use it to like smash each other's pigeons off buildings, because so it was actually a really good game, kind of balancing mechanism, but it was funny and, people love it and all that. So the interesting thing with this one is where we're going with it is we're retheming it to sort of like a Dungeons and Dragons sort of parody because, to make it more scenario based, to make it so that the game itself has the ability to be played multiple times as opposed to like play it once. Okay, that was funny. That's it. People want that for a gaming experience, especially if it's kind of expensive. So trying to keep the humor of the game and a lot of like those fun dexterity kind of actions, but also making it something where you can have like leveling up of heroes, leveling up of, characters and monsters and all kinds of other stuff, but still having it, again, like that fun, lighthearted thing. And so this has been a really interesting experience because, I thought even before the first game, you sign the game, you turn it over, they do whatever they want to it. And then like, boom, at some point it comes out. Well, with the first game with Crash Course, which is with IDW, they're like, no, we want you to do the development on it. And I was like, if there's problems in this game, I'm the one that puts them there. Like, are you sure this is a good idea? So it was a really good experience in like really having to like step back, look at what you've done. How is this working? Is this accomplishing the goals you want? All that. And so then I'm glad I had that because especially for Dirty Dragons, it was easy for me to like slash through things on Crash Course that, I didn't think needed to be there because it wasn't like my baby from the start. But now that this is my baby from the start, and having to really think about like, what does the game need? What does the game want? Does this make sense? And like, what are things that I have to cut out? And there's some things that I really, really, really like, I just loved and I thought were so fun. But I just thought, it doesn't make sense in this current iteration. So that means, of course, like they can be on the back burner for, future games, of course. But also, it's just, or maybe I could have them pop up in a scenario, so we'll see. But that's one thing, though, is really when you struggle and it's not working and you can't figure out the solution, and it's really hard sometimes to get to those moments where you feel stuck and you have to have this sense of, like I'm gonna come through out onto the other side. You have to have this sense of being able to push through and actually like that you're going to be able to figure this out, because because the thing is like, I have to, it's not because if I don't, then it's not going to go anywhere. But the thing is this is something that, wants to be made, needs to be made, I think. And so, that's a good level of pressure to have. It helps keep you motivated, but it also scares the hell out of you too sometimes. So this is where you really, like, in terms of understanding yourself, this is all pure process, and like there's nothing more important to me than playtesting because you just get so much external feedback. So the longer I go between playtests, like I'm kind of like itchy, but then if I'm stuck on something, I can't just put the same thing out in front of people over and over and over again because I'm going to get the same feedback. That's not progress, so it's really an interesting, like, internal struggle sometimes to figure out what's the best way to go and then get it to playtesting as quickly as I can with the next iteration.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that is the entirety of, like, you don't want to show your playtesters the same thing over and over and over again. And I had that problem when I was younger and designed RPGs because RPGs are it's a very big beast to build, like, because playtesting sessions are really long. It's really hard to test specific mechanics in how they will work when people are actually playing the game. So like building the base systems are often very easy and you can build interesting systems, but they might not work with the theme of the role-playing game, or they might not work with the overall aesthetic you're going for. And it will take people out of the loop while they're playing the game because it just doesn't work in that aspect. And I was working on a role-playing game that is still basically kind of a little bit in production. It's on the back burner, and I'm looking at it all the time and saying I should really finish this. But it has gone for like 7 complete mechanical changes because one of the core concepts of the game ended up being religious war, like the Crusades stuff, style thematic. And the mechanics just didn't end up conveying that. So when people were actually playing the game and like, oh, I'm going to do this and try to do this thing that works with my character that is a crusader, they just ended up not being able to do that thing that they envisioned that they would be able to do as a crusader because the game system didn't allow it. And so we had to scrap the system like 7 times. And that was it was just it was this experience of taking a role-playing game to the table and saying, we're going to play this. Everyone needs to make characters, and then we're going to play it like 2 times or 1 time. And it's a new system, and everyone knows about it. And then they come back, and we play it for like 2 meetings, and then you come up and say, hey, I've updated the system. You all need to remake your characters or make new characters. And it's tired out my primary 2 or 3 groups of playtesters, internal playtesters that I had at the time. So it kind of boiled down to this slow slog through iteration hell or development hell, where the game didn't work because the game, like, when I was younger, I didn't design for themes at all. Like, we had this cool theme of religious war in the back of our head, me and my friend who designed this. And we just ended up being more and more disappointed with every system we made because it didn't work with the theme, because we were systems designers and we were sitting down and like, yeah, this would be a cool system.
Right.
And then we tried to fit the theme on it. And that was I don't know. It wasn't a very, very good way to go about it.
Well, now that brings up a question. When you're designing a game, what comes first, the theme or the game concept, the game mechanics?
That really depends for me. Like if I'm building if my idea of the game comes from, I want to try out this style of mechanics, then it starts there. I have a set of mechanics that I know that I want to try, and then I build a theme around that nowadays. That as soon as I got like, these are the mechanics I want to have, I create a theme that works with it, instead of going with or you start with a theme and you design your system into it. I would say that you can do both. And currently I'm building a system that I will put a theme on in the end. But then I will make sure that that theme perfectly fits the mechanics, or vice versa. Like you will always have to change small things in the system or small things in the theme to make it really work. Right now it's looking like I'm going to make a build your own social media game, but like in a board game state, because that's what makes the most sense with the mechanics I'm building.
Okay.
But on the other hand, State of Wonder started out with, what if you build city-states? And then we went from there.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Now, Kathleen, your game with the pigeons started out as one theme, and now you're developing it with dragons, which is very different. So what comes first for you?
Well, if you think about it, dragons are just pigeons with fire. Really angry pigeons with fire. I'm definitely like a thematic kind of person. Like, and if I'm playing a Euro game, like Le Havre is one of my favorite Euro games in the world, I don't really care about the theme in that, I mean, that's like a mathematical puzzle, and I'm totally fine with that for what it is. Like, I don't mind any action that I have to take in a game like that where it doesn't make sense, like what you're doing. I mean, I think the game has a really beautiful internal sort of logic, and it does sort of make sense that you would go to different buildings to use those things. But in general, the more thematic a game is, the more I want to see the mechanics really mesh with the game itself. So like one of my favorite games from a design standpoint is the game Survive. I talk about this one a lot, but the reason why is I just love this game because it's got such a great theme about like an island that's slowly sinking away. So you remove a tile every turn as the island gets smaller and eventually it explodes. And you've got all these people on the island that you're trying to get to the safety islands. And so like all the decisions that you make sense in terms of like what you would be doing. And the big dangers in the water are the sharks, the whales, and the sea monsters. Well, sharks eat people in the water, but they don't smash boats. And, Jaws, everybody knows that, right? And then whales smash boats, but they don't eat people because, Moby Dick, we know that. People go swimming with whales all the time, And so sea monsters just destroy everything, but they only move one space because they're so big and slow. Like, it just makes sense, So I think especially, and for me, I'm not somebody who's like, okay, I'm in the mood for like an auction game. Like, how can I have a cool auction game? You know what I mean? My brain just doesn't think like that. For me, it's much more like, what are the real world kind of ways that people or something, whatever it is that's the subject game, would make, like, what are the types of decisions that they would make? What are the things they would do? And then I just look to gamify that, So like in, Dirty Dragons, you've got actions that are, like when you're just like fire bombing, when you're like spitting fire, when you're blowing, when you're, all these different things that players can do, and that you would do as a dragon. Like, I make that into like the mechanics as far as what players can do. And so I definitely I just remember thinking about way, way, way long time ago when I first started playing games, and there was a game called Primordial Soup, and they're like, "Oh, you should play this." And you're like, because I always enjoy this rather adolescent sense of humor. It's not a mistake that I teach middle school. They're like, "Yeah, your bacteria, you eat poop and or you poop and all this." I'm like, "Yeah, that sounds fun." And then we open up the box and it's like hexagons and sticks. I'm like, "What?" Like, this doesn't look anything like the box promised. And I actually didn't even play the game. I'm like, "Oh, let's play something else," because like I just like. Like, oh, it's a good game. It's really, I'm sure it is. But, when the theme is promising me one thing and then the game itself is a totally different experience, I don't necessarily care for that. I mean, if something's like short and the theme's pasted on, sure. Like Wasabi. I just played that with some students the other day, and I haven't played that one in years. And, you're just making lines of sushi ingredients and, it's just a spatial placement tile game. It's really not about sushi. And they put all this stuff on there to make it look like sushi, but at the end of the day, it's really not. But that's okay. It's short. I don't need everything to be like this perfect, magical world of mice acting like mice and, and whatever, buildings acting like buildings. But I definitely, for me, I love like games where you feel like you're doing the thing that you're supposed to be doing. And so when it comes to me with theme, it's definitely, that's where I start from. I mean, Dirty Birdie started with my sister, telling me about how she was giving her kids a bath, and she lives in Berlin. And she said, "You are a dirty bird." And her daughter said back when she was very little in German, she's like, "Ich nicht ein dirty bird." Like you're having English, having German, saying like, "I'm not a dirty bird." And, and just in that, like the name Dirty Birdie just got into my head. And then there was this one little Girl Scout song we'd sing about Dirty Birdie, this whole thing. And that's where it started from, And so, and all my other ideas come from, generally speaking, some sort of thematic kind of idea that I think is really fun. And then like, how can I take those actions and gamify it? So I definitely start out on the theme side. And that's one reason where I'm, like the difficulty right now that I'm working through, and it's a fun problem, but as far as what are the different things dragons would do? Why would they do them? What are the things the heroes would do? How would they do them? How do I work that into the game? I start from there.
I really like the idea of Euro games with just you have cool mechanics and then you have like something around it that just works out. But then the Euro games I end up really enjoying are the ones that have a theme that works with those games.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. My favorite Euro game must be Stone Age. Like, I've tried to play Stone Age every time at my board game cafe when I'm not judging Pokemon tournaments or when I'm not playing Magic the Gathering or doing other card game stuff. I tried to play Stone Age because I know that I don't own Stone Age, but I should really own Stone Age so I can play it at home. Mm-hmm. But like the theme in Stone Age makes sense, and the things that don't make sense, like eating your own gold, when that happens, it becomes like a joke around the entire table of how silly it is. And that just works with my play group. I think that it's like, it just works out thematically anyway. And I'm known as the person who eats wood because I always harvest so much wood. And then I'm like, I can just eat wood this turn and it will solve itself. So I've gotten like this thing where my tribe always eats wood, and that's their thing. And I can't really break that when I'm playing Stone Age nowadays. So I just keep eating wood. And I know it's not good to eat wood at times, but I do it because it's like, it's one of these things that I just enjoy about the game is stealing the wood harvesting from everyone else. So it always ends up with me having like 7 people there. And I'm like, I'm going to take all the wood from everyone.
No, that's such a good strategy. That's such a good strategy because then if you have tons of wood, you can use it to buy all the resource cards. Like in general, you should always try to get wood instead of food. Absolutely. I totally agree with you. Yeah. But that's a great one.
Yeah. But like when I design games, as I said earlier, I approached it from 2 angles. And with State of Wonder, we started with the, what if you're a city-state? And then that turned into, what if you're a city-state within a kingdom that is in civil war and you're trying to take the throne? And then all of the mechanics keep working on this basic, two-line theme pile that we had from the beginning, or theme sentences that we had from the beginning. The theme test is like the best mechanical test ever. Like, if you can't say that this mechanic makes sense in the game and the theme that the game is making, it shouldn't be there. Like, I am also at the same time designing a narrative for City of Wonder cards and for if I'm going to make expansions. So I need to have a story in place for all of the cards to make sense. So I'm building a bigger world and trying to make cards make sense in and out of themselves, and that I can tell the story through the cards. Instead of it being just, how does this make sense thematically, it also has to make sense narratively. And this is when I'm starting to be like, I have a card in one of the expansions planned right now that it doesn't make sense. The theme of the card and the narrative of the card doesn't make sense. And that's a really big problem because the card feels weird. Like, the narrative of the card is that it's a character that can scale walls and fight people within walls and take over cities from within style card. That's the narrative of the card. But the card doesn't do that in its mechanics, and it doesn't make it in its theme. So I've ended up like, I maybe need to redo the entire narrative of this card so it makes what it does in the narrative. It does what it's actually doing. I personally not really have a problem. I myself have a hard time designing games like you, Kathleen, where you just say, I want this theme and I want everything to work according to this theme at times, because I generally have an idea of what systems I want. Because I can be like, oh, I really want to build a game about building your own development trees or your own research trees within the game. And then it just ends up with, okay, so if I have these mechanics, how do I apply a theme to that? So, because I hate themeless Euro games, or like Euro games where any theme could really fit, because it's just mechanic puzzles. I know I have to always think about the narrative and the theme of the game, even though I design the systems first. So it's
now there are different types of game genres, I guess. There's Euros, there's what's called Ameritrash, which I hate that name. There are card games, there are abstract games. When you're designing your games, do you take any of that into consideration?
Well, I know that I'm going to probably design something that I would want my students to play. And I'm lucky in that I have a whole little collection of gameplay playtesters whenever I want. I look for things that tend to be on the lighter side, that can play in 45 minutes or less, have some sort of like, fun, engaging theme. So I know, and the nice thing too, and I also know, especially from being around as long, is, the different types of, publishers who would be interested in this type of game, that type of game. So I know I'm always going to be kind of probably working in that one. Like, the thought of like, oh, I should design some big, heavy, huge thing. Like, for me, I'm just like, I'm a visual learner. Like, one of my problems in school when doing math was I would have to convert whatever we were doing into basically a 3D model in my head so I could visualize it. I'd manipulate that, and then I would do the math problem, And so it took me a lot longer, not because I couldn't understand it. I just had to basically, and I didn't know I was doing this then, but, that's what I had to do in order to understand the problem. Just moving numbers around back and forth, like, honestly, still doesn't make a lot of sense to me sometimes. I mean, that's why I think I like games that are so, like, where the mechanics and the theme go so well together, because then it makes sense what you're trying to do. I understand what I'm trying to do, as opposed to like, who's the best at kind of doing all these quick little calculations, figuring out the relative value of this to that. That's not me. That won't be me. And so I will lose, but as long as I like who I'm playing with, I'm okay with doing that, So I think for me, that's what I tend to look for, or that's what I tend to be drawn to as far as games go, because that's how my mind is processed. Like, I'll never, ever probably design a Euro game, but if you want somebody to come in and give you some like big crazy ideas on what this could be, like, I'm your girl, like, I can do that. That's no problem, So that's why for me, like, struggling with the mechanics of something is a really good experience for me, because it's not necessarily what I'm I'm necessarily drawn to. It's why I get really freaked out when I'm having trouble with it. Because, it's on one hand, I know this is a difficulty I have, but on the other hand, you can't let that stop you, and you just have to keep pushing through it. So that's why when it comes to like exploring the self by designing games, I mean, you get deep, deep, deep into your head in terms of how you address problems, how you solve them, and you learn so much from it. I think it's awesome, but it's scary as hell. I think I've said that twice now.
I totally forgot
Just
the
say
question.
it. You're a math wizard. We know. You're a math wizard. We know it. Just say it. Just say it.
I'm actually terrible at higher level math. Like, as soon as we got into like trigonometry and I don't even like trigonometry and calculating with large numbers and stuff like that, I totally lost it because I was like, I can't see this. I can't understand these things. But like, give me a spreadsheet of statistics or any kind of like gambling numbers or any kind of statistics. Oh God, I've forgotten it. We have a name for it specifically in Swedish, which would be really stupid to say here, but I can't remember the name of it in English. Chance of success, the teachings of chance of success, like understanding the odds of rolling dice.
Are you talking about probability?
Yeah, I think it's probability. Sorry about that. Because
okay.
Like if I roll, I can basically calculate weird stuff like what is the most likely outcome if I roll 17 d8s and what is like the range of things I will do. I can understand bell curves. I can understand some kind of like sinus curves and stuff like that. Even if I see the curves, I can understand it, but I can't like calculate with sinus curves, so sinus and cos and tan and all of that. But for designing board games, like you don't really need super duper advanced math, but you need to be able to design solutions. And I think that like some of the most inspiring, like mechanical and systematic designers I've met have been logical more than they have been great at math. Like they have been people who can determine what will happen from just glancing at stuff and saying, won't this become a problem? And then you think about it for a while and you say, yeah, that will become a problem because of these different kinds of things. Like also exploring yourself, like you said, like when you're designing a game and thinking about all of the problems, you also have to take into account that these are all things I built before, like earlier, like the role-playing game I've built and thrown away 7 times. Like every time I have to throw away that system because something doesn't work or the system is way too hard to process while playing a tabletop game, it just ends up being like you have to throw everything away and just say, well, that didn't work out, not because I'm bad at this. It's more like I understood that this wouldn't work out, so I threw it away so I can start doing something better that will work out.
That's probably a nicer way to frame it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But like it's important to understand that as well, because I think everyone designs something bad, and you have to design like 100 bad things before you design good things. I've designed 7 different card game systems before I got to the State of Wonder system. I've designed 7 of very many things now that I think about it. Anyway, I designed like 7 card game systems before I got to State of Wonder. One was like a first-person shooter card game, which tried to put all of those things together. And I never was able to put the first-person shooter feeling into a card game because they're paced very differently. And even when you got it, like basically it worked out pretty good. It just didn't work out good because you didn't get this feeling of the satisfaction of doing the regular first-person shooter action, like being able to hit what you're supposed to be hitting. Is like in a card game, it doesn't translate. And it took me, that was a concept we abandoned really early. It took like 1 month of like basic ideas and then just like, yeah, no, this isn't going to work out at all. But another, like, we tried out a lot of other things and things just didn't work out there either. Then we built a board game that was about civilian revolution or a revolution in a fascist state. And we added actual Nerf gun duels to the game. And they happened really rarely. It happened like if both players took the same action, and it was a hidden action game where you had a judge player who also tried to win the game, which was really, really interesting. But like you tried to, if both normal players did the same actions, their characters ended up at the same place and they had to duel each other. And the judge player would look at both players' action and then at their own discretion say duel at any time before their next turn. And the players had to duel. So they could also weigh the things towards each other. And this was what we wanted from a first-person shooter experience, because this was after the first-person shooter card game thing we did. And when we designed that, it was just so clear that the missing part of the card game of a first-person shooter was the hand-to-eye coordination dexterity part of the game. Because because in regular card games, it's not like you're throwing your cards at stuff. You could most likely make a game about throwing cards at stuff. But the dueling part of that game was like the most liked mechanic, and the game became so good because of that mechanic. And we had some hilarious moments in playtesting where people were like throwing themselves off their chairs and hiding under the table and flipping their chair over themselves to protect themselves. That project is one of these projects that we were like 4 people who designed it in the last year of high school, I think. And I was really I'm still to this day, I'm upset that I've lost the rule book, because it was only a paper rule book that we had written by hand.
Oh.
And I'm really sad that we lost that, because I really want to look at it and say, how can I make this work? Because it was so fun to play it at the table. And you could only play at 3 players, but like it was really good at 3 players.
Yeah. Well, I think one thing too, especially when it comes to game design, is there's really, and there's different stages, and sometimes you cycle between them. But, in terms of design, that's when, you come up with your game and your core mechanics and what the, theme and all that. And then when you start to get into development is really that refinement period of time where you take what you've got and just work it and work it and work it and play test it and work it and work it and work it and work it. Because, very few people, can come up with something at the start that is amazing and solid and, just from the very beginning. And I had a really fun experience yesterday, actually, because Gray Fox Games is here in town. I'm good friends with Josh Lobkovitz. Hi, Josh. And a game designer that we're friends with, Pedro Mendoza, was in town to work with Josh, especially on some games that he's working on. So I was over there yesterday and just play testing his prototypes. And I mean, Josh is so good in terms of really like identifying issues, identifying problems, just narrowing in on, key flaws in games or just, ways, opportunities to make them better, so it's one of those things where, I'm definitely adding feedback here and there, but most of my feedback, surprise, surprise, tends to be more of the, thematic variety. When I offer mechanical feedback, they're like, yeah, I don't know that would work. But, but the thing too is, listening to just listening to the conversation about like how Josh works as a developer and how to take this game and where the changes need to be. It's such an important experience for you as a designer, so the thing is if people want to get into games, want to get into board games, one, make a prototype, make it fast and cheap. Don't make it cute, just make it something that you can get on the table to test out your ideas, start, going to play test it with other people, show it. No one's going to steal your idea. Don't worry about that. Just play test it and get it out there. But the main thing is, it's like a big rock. It's hard to like push it, but once you get the big rock kind of rolling, it's not as hard as you think it's going to be to keep that thing going, so I would just say, don't be afraid to try, like, so if you come up with something bad, that's all right. You know what I mean? Like, you can probably make it better, and it's still really fun to do. You meet tons of people, you just get to experience the gaming world from a totally different perspective. I would say stay humble, listen, don't interrupt people when they give you feedback, because don't explain your ideas to them. Listen to what they're actually experiencing, because that's really what matters more, especially when you're not around. And, and just be willing to, take a piece of yourself, if we're going to go into the self idea again, but take a piece of yourself and show it to other people, and don't take it personally if they don't like it. Don't take it personally if they tell you no, to say, do you have any feedback? And then all you can do is just keep going from there. And I think, especially teaching game design to kids for as long as I have, for like 10 years now, so much of what I do isn't necessarily teaching the nuts and bolts of game design. Once we get kind of into, they develop an idea, it's really about coaching kids through this process of uncertainty, through this process of, is my game going to work? Is it not going to work? And then getting them to show unfinished ideas, teaching them how to give good feedback to other people, because those are things that I think you can learn from game design that you can apply in so many other different areas and avenues, which to me is the real benefit from an educational standpoint. The vast majority of my students will not go on to design games in the future. I feel fairly confident with that. Mm-hmm. It's not that they don't hate it. It's just, it won't be it's not necessarily their thing. I definitely have some kids who do. I definitely have kids who still are working on stuff that they reach out to me in high school and college, say, hey, I've got this game idea. I'm like, cool, bring it by. Let's play it, So, I mean, it's certainly possible. And we need to get kids playing good games. This is always, so that they can become good game designers later too. But the main thing is like, don't be afraid of what you're going to find out about yourself when you design a game, if nothing else. Because I know a lot of people are just afraid to try. They're just afraid that, what if this won't be good? What if I won't be successful? I've wasted all this time or whatever else. And I would say, like, looking back, I never think about those moments, because it's like the moment when you do have something and it does work and it's just this great, great moment and it's so fun, it's worth it. It's totally, totally worth it to do. So if you're sitting there going, I have this idea, cool, 3 days. That's my time limit. I'm giving you 3 days to make up a proof of concept, halfway finished prototype, and I want you to play test it first with yourself, then with other people. 3 days. In 3 days, you can come up with something, and then you're on your way.
Rapid prototyping and paper prototyping is like the one thing that made State of Wonder what it is today. We started out with like paper slips that we just wrote everything on. We had the entire everything about the game on one paper, and then we had separate paper cards that we just threw at the table, and this works like this. No, it doesn't. Okay, then it doesn't work like this. Write it on the paper. And then we kept doing that for like a week because we were like 4 people working on it, 5 people. One was an artist. So it was like this really weird, or not really weird, it's a common way to design games, that you don't make anything that looks good in the first year. Like, make sure that your design works, and make sure that your idea might be bad from the beginning. I think that State of Wonder was a terrible idea from the beginning. Like a card game without random elements. Why should that work? How does that work? And then we started designing it, and we started refining it. And I was unsure about where to go with the project a year ago because we hadn't found what was fun about the game yet. Like really fun about the game yet. Like, it could have just been any other card game, but it was a worse version of that other card game at that point. So it's also about that, like finding where your game is and what your game might become is like the experience when I found the first mechanic of the first mechanic piece of the puzzle, or like the first design decision of the puzzle to make State of Wonder into what I think is today a great game, is the bluffing mechanics or the prediction mechanics, where players have to guess what their opponent is playing. And that little piece of the puzzle opened up so many things in design. And when we found that little piece, like it wasn't really a big thing when we first tried it out. It was like one of 25 different things on a paper. But when we got to trying that 1 out of 25 things on a paper, both me and the player who play tested it at that time was like, this is the thing we need to go with. This makes the game into something unique with its own identity. And we went with it. And now it's one of the redeeming factors of the game that I think make the game the most interesting. So before that, it was a watered-down combat system. Or not a watered-down combat system. It was a combat system, but most games have combat systems if they're about war in any way. So it's not something new or special.
So it's an evolutionary process is what you're saying.
Yeah. Like designing, you will have to start somewhere. And you will have to find the piece of that works. And then find out is this fun enough to play as it is? Or do we need more things? And you want to build small things at first and then go bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger. You never want to start with, we're going to build the biggest epic world there is. And then we're going to have this unique crafting system on top of that. And on top of that, we need to have bluffing and we need to have intricate harvesting systems where you need to build farms that you can repopulate like in Age of Empires. Like you don't start there. You start with, let's make a farm game where the goal is to grow wheat, and then you make a game about growing wheat, and then you figure out if that's good enough or not.
Right. No, I agree.
Build it in layers.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, as fascinating and informative as this discussion is, I think we probably need to call a halt at this time. We've been going for quite a while, but I want to thank you both for coming on and talking about this and sharing your experiences with me and with the audience. And I hope you'll come back on in future episodes for more discussions.
Oh, happy to.
Yeah, me too. I love being on podcasts overall. And this is like one of the big podcasts I'm following. So it's like, whoa, I got to be on this.
Oh, nice. Thank you. All right. Well, thank you so much. Okay, so now we are winding things down and looking ahead to what we've got coming up in the next week or two. Kathleen, what have you got on your plate coming up?
Well, this is exciting because my students have been playing tons of games, and we're starting now to get into them determining what the theme of their games will be, and the mechanics, and we'll hopefully get them to start working on prototypes by the end of the week. So it's a super big week for us in game design world. I'm excited because I had a couple different ideas with my game that I'm wanting to play out. So that's always a good feeling. And I'm super excited because in spring break in a few weeks, I get to go to Italy and Greece where I've never been. And I'm I'm so excited. I'm so excited. We're actually taking a group of 30 people, of kids and parents and teachers from my school. And we're just going to stomp all over a bunch of big rocks, I think. But I'm so excited. So excited. So
that is exciting.
Yeah, I've got a good month coming up.
Yeah, that sounds pretty awesome.
Yeah, I'm excited. I'm so excited.
Where are you going to? It was Italy, right? I've been there once. Yeah. It was great. We were to the island. I can't remember the name in English because I only know it in
Sicily?
Swedish. Sicily. We were on Sicily and it was amazing. Like, we were there in our 9th grade class trip and it was awesome. Like, Italy was pretty great.
Yeah. A lot of the kids wanted to go, especially, well, one, because of pizza, obviously, but also a lot of my kids are really into, fantasy themed books like Percy Jackson series and all the rest. And, so we're doing a lot of history, a lot of mythology, Pompeii, all kinds of stuff. It's going to be phenomenal. I'm so excited.
Nice.
Yes.
Emelie, what have you got coming up on your schedule?
Yeah, in the next coming weeks, I've got a big convention in Sweden coming up. It's in the end of March, so it's not really in the next 1 or 2 weeks, but it's like the biggest convention in Sweden. So it's gonna be pretty nice. We're gonna play a lot of games, and I'm going to do some demos for Still of Wonder, and that's gonna be nice. And then what am I doing in March? It's the end of the Kickstarter.
And your Kickstarters.
Yeah, my Kickstarter is ending, and that's, or not really, like I think we're gonna have a post Kickstarter thing, but so that's still gonna be like a pledge manager that you can go to and do the things with the game. So, but yeah, the original print or the original Kickstarter time goes out, so that's gonna be pretty nice. Or I'm gonna be able to sleep at least. Like this week has been crazy. 4 hours at most.
Oh no!
Wow.
But yeah, if we, other than that, it's like the regular Pokemon organization, like playing some tournaments and doing stuff for the kids in my local game club who play Pokemon like crazy people. They're really, really good, and it's really fun to see them grow all the time. And other than that, I look forward to playing Stone Age again, because I need to get my friends together and play Stone Age.
You really like that game.
Yeah, it's also on Board Game Arena. I'll play with you online if you want.
Oh, it is? Cool.
Yeah.
I didn't know.
Nice. Nice. Yeah, we will definitely have a link to your Kickstarter in our show notes, and people can find that by going to ourturnpodcast.com/episode
76.
And we'll have a link to your Kickstarter from there. Over the month of March, I am taking some classes to get certified to be on a community emergency response team. Mm-hmm. So that's a program, apparently a FEMA program, that trains civilians to help first responders in emergencies. So it's, organization training, light search and rescue, fire safety, disaster response skills, things like that. My friend Yuriko, hi Yuriko, signed up for it, and she wanted someone to go through it with her, and so I offered to do that. So that starts on March 6th, and it's Tuesday and Saturday throughout the whole month of March. And so I'm looking forward to doing that. That should be an interesting experience. Not game related, but still definitely interesting.
Yeah, no, that's super interesting.
I don't really like, because Sweden don't have emergencies, so we don't like, or like big emergencies. Because like every time I hear about like earthquakes and tsunamis or storms and hurricanes, I'm like, I've never even seen one of those. Like the worst thing I've been is like, oh, I was snowed in for a day. It was like 30 centimeters of snow or something, and I'm like, okay, I can't go out. Let's stay in. But like, so when you're talking about like emergency rescue training, I'm like, oh, that's like CPR and stuff, right? But it didn't sound like that. So it sounds like we're gonna have a pretty fun time with all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, here in California, of course, there's the concern of earthquakes. Because we have some major faults going through the state. There's also tsunami danger because we have a coastline and a volcanically active area, and we also have volcanoes in the state, and then wildfires are also a big problem here. So when Yuriko proposed taking this class and asked for someone to take it with her, I thought, my big passion is serving others, and this seemed like a good way to do that. So I'm looking forward to it. It should be a neat challenge, but I think it'll also be, learning some useful skills as well. Mm-hmm. So, all right, Kathleen, if people want to reach out to you online, how can they get a hold of you?
You can find me on Twitter. I am at Mercury with 7 M's. And the other way to get a hold of me, where most people tend to find me, is through my website, KathleenMercury.com, where I put all of my teaching resources online for free, because what's the fun of just making them and having them sit in a folder, and people all over the world use them, and it's super cool. And I love hearing from people who use them, which is awesome.
Nice.
And so those are the two, but yeah. It's like, it's one of the best things I've ever done. And it just kind of was a lark, and it just turned into a whole thing. So I love it. And those are the best places to get a hold of me. You can find me around in other places too, but those are the two best ways.
Okay. And Emelie, how can people find you online?
Would say the best way is to send me a message on Twitter. My tag is at SoGameDev. Or you can find me on Facebook at Emelie Van Rodin, or at my Facebook page for the game. That is just State of Wonder I think. I'm a little unsure on the Facebook page, but it should be pretty easy to find.
Okay. Well, we'll have links to it in our show notes. And you can find me on Twitter. I run the Our Turn Podcast Twitter handle, which is at Our Turn Podcast. And I am also the guild master on our Board Game Geek Guild, which is guild number 2600. And then if you want to reach out to the podcast on Facebook, Sarah Reed runs our Facebook page, and that is facebook.com/Our Turn Podcast. And then, of course, our show notes are going to be at ourturnpodcast.com/
episode 76.
Kathleen and Emelie, thank you both so much for joining me for this episode. This has been a lot of fun for me.
I'm so glad. Thanks so much for having me. I always love talking with you.
Yeah, I was really excited when you wrote to me and said, like, we want to have you on our podcast. I was like, yay! And it was really fun being here and talking about game design, especially since me and Kathleen are in basically two different camps of designing games.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting. The different perspectives,
Yeah.
But as long as the game is good, it doesn't matter, right?
Exactly. Doesn't matter how you get there, so long as you follow your own path. All right. Well, until next time, and on behalf of the entire Our Turn podcast team, that was our turn. Now it's yours.
Thank you for listening. This episode was recorded on February 25th, 2018, and is written and produced by Cathy Ford, Kathleen Mercury, and Emelie Van Rodin, with assistance from Mark Ford. We want and encourage your questions, comments, and feedback. Please call 916-426-2873 and leave us a short voicemail or send an email to feedback@ourturnpodcast.com. Our theme music was composed by Adriana Crickle. Incidental music was provided by Ben Sound. Please check out our show notes to learn more about these talented artists. The material in this episode is copyrighted under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. If you want to learn more about the games discussed in this episode, please visit our website at ourturnpodcast.com/episode 76. You can find a list of the games along with links to their listing on BoardGameGeek.com. We are proud members of the Dice Tower Network. You can find out about other shows on the network like the D6 Generation, The Secret Cabal, or Ludology by going to dicetowernetwork.com. Thank you for your support. If you like what you heard, please tell your friends about us.